When it comes to unfortunate deaths or strange ways to die, one comes to mind for me was the man who keeps slamming himself against the TD building window on the top floor to show how strong the window was. And during a student tour group, he tried to show the same trick only for the window to pop out and him in the glass falling from the 24th floor. To this note, this glass never broke, but he definitely did. Yeah, so as disturbing ways, let's look into it, especially for the royals. Hi, my name is Jessa. Please join me as we look together top 10 disturbing ways royal family members died. And before we begin, in the last video I was in top 10 evil families that secretly run the world. The riddle I gave was, what has a neck but no head? The answer is a bottle. Your next riddle will be at the end of this video. Number 10, King Pyrrhus. King Pyrrhus, who ruled the ancient Greek kingdom of Epirus, was also known as a brave and skilled commander, but his death at the hands of an old woman during the Battle of Argos in 2072 BC was far from the glorious end. The battle took place in a narrow city streets of Argos, and while Pyrrhus was fighting an Argive soldier, he was hit on the head and fell from his horse. The Greek philosopher and historian Plutarch writes that the soldier's mother was looking down from her house, and when she saw that her son was engaging in a conflict with the king, she was filled with distress in view of the danger of her son, and lifting up a tile with both her hands and threw it at the king. It is not known whether he was killed outright or merely dazed by the blow. Either way, the enemy seized the opportunity and him. Number 9, King Henry I. King Henry I of England decided to indulge in a hearty meal of lampreys, a type of fish that looks like an eel and had circular mouth filled with rows of teeth. Although Henry was fond of the fish, the doctor advised him to avoid them because, according to historian Henry of Huntingdon, they always disagreed with him. Henry ignored his physician and chowed down on the forbidden fish. Soon afterwards, they caused a sudden and extreme disturbance under which his age framed sunk into a deathly torpor. Henry I is not the only king to have eaten himself to death. Adolf Frederick of Sweden managed to do it in 1771 after eating copious amount of seafood and then tucking into a semla bun. Then another and another and another until he ate 14 of them and then having stomach problems and then dying. Number 8, the Duke of Clarence. The nobility was usually granted the honor of being privately executed rather than publicly humiliated, which means that their cause of death is sometimes uncertain. This is the case with George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence, who was executed for treason by his brother, King Henry IV. In 1478, during the War of Roses, as rumors soon spread that rather than being hanged, he was actually drowned in a barrel of wine. Although it may have just been false gossip, his unusual death is recorded in multiple histories. Fabian's Chronicle 1516, for example, mentions that Clarence drowned in a butt of Malmsey wine, maybe drinking himself to death, but supposes death of wine gained even more traction when William Shakespeare included it in his history play Richard III, 1597. In the play, Clarence is stabbed, but then one of his, killers declares, "I'll drown you in wine." But wine. Number 7, King Edward II. Edward II's rule of England was fraught with controversy, much of which is stemmed from his relationship with Piers Gaveston. The nature of their relationship remains unknown, although it speculates that they were lovers. Maybe they were just roommates. Regardless, the English king's close bond with his favorite and poor leadership led to Queen Isabella and the nobility killing him. Many modern historians believe that he was simply left without food and water to die of natural causes. However, medieval historians claim that a hot poker was inserted into his butt to burn his bowels. In the Chronicles explains that this was also done as no apparent of any wound or hurt outwardly might have one perceived. Another account states that Edmund was killed by an assassin who hid himself in the toilet below and struck the king twice with a very sharp knife into the private parts, and leaving the weapon in his butt, and he fled away. Although it is benefited from his death, both Huntingdon and William of Malmesbury claim that it was an Englishman, Adric Sterona, who hired the assassin, and when he was subsequently executed for the crime, he breathed out his abnominal spirit to hell. Number 6, Emperor Valerian. The Roman Emperor Valerian ruled from AD 253 to 260 when he was captured in battle by the Persian Emperor Shapur I. As a prisoner of war, Valerian was subjected to humiliations, which included being used as a stepping stool from which Shapur would mount his horse. Sources vary in the description of this eventual execution, with the most gruesome tale being that he was forced to drink molten gold. An alternative story is offered up by an advisor to Emperor Constantine I, who alleged that Valerian was flayed alive and his skin was then dyed with vermilion and displayed as a warning to the Romans that they should not place too great confidence in their own strength. Although neither account is verified, drinking gold and being flayed alive are both very horrible, painful ways to go. Kinda like Game of Thrones where they poured gold on that one king. Number 5, Sigurd Eysteinsson. The first Earl of Orkney was the leader of a Viking attack on Scotland, and while few details of his life made the history books, his unusual death certainly did. Although his attempted invasion of northern Scotland in 892, he agreed to an even fight against a royal steward called Malbergus, chariot. Each leader was supposed to fight alongside 40 men, but Sigurd cheated by mounting 80 men across 40 horses. Sigurd won the battle, of course, and then tied his enemy and his head in a straddle as a trophy. The Norse history text reports that this was actually his fatal mistake, as he was known for being a bucktooth, a particularly prominently pearly white caused a wound on his leg as he rode. The wound quickly became infected and Sigurd died. His enemy may have been decapitated, but he may have revenge in death. Number 4. Emperor Valentinian I. Valentinian apparently died of a stroke after screaming in rage. Valentinian was a Roman emperor from AD 364 to 375 and spent much of his reign defending the borders of the Roman Empire in Europe. Valentinian met what a group of haughty messengers, the Germanic people of the Romans, had been fighting for a long time to negotiate a ceasefire. The envoy maintained that the Romans had been wrong to build forts in their land and could not guarantee that all chiefs would cease their attacks. Ammianus Marcellinus, a Roman soldier and historian, wrote that Valentinian that burst into a mighty fit of wrath, and that he once calmed down was suddenly speechless and suffocating, and his face was tinged with a fiery flush. Valentinian had worked himself into such a rage that he actually gave himself a stroke. Number 3. Emperor Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang unified China for a first time, after which he took the title of emperor in 221 BC and then began his process of building the Great Wall of China. Alongside these huge achievements, he was also obsessed with trying to live forever. In his attempt to achieve immortality, his alchemists prepared elixirs for him to drink, but his habit of consuming wine mixed with honey and mercury led to his death at the age of 49. Mercury would have also followed him into the afterlife, as he was buried in the city-sized mausoleum guarded by a life-size terracotta army, which supposedly featured rivers of mercury. Until his resting place was discovered in 1974, it was thought that the writings of the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian greatly exaggerated the magnificence of his tomb, but he was proven correct about the huge number of clay figures and may also be right about the rivers of mercury. However, this will still remain a mystery until the technology is developed to enter the tomb without damaging the contents. Number 2. Duke Jing. Duke Jing ruled the state of Jin in the ancient China between 599 and 581 BC and died shortly after he abdicated due to an illness. According to the ancient text, the Zhuozhuang, Jing consulted a shaman after being visited by a demonic entity in a nightmare. The shaman told me that he would not live to taste the new wheat, and Jing struggled on, and when the wheat was ready to be eaten, he had the shaman killed for making an incorrect prediction. Either just before he tucked into the tasty wheat or just after, he suddenly felt the need to go to the washroom. It is unknown why, but Jing fell in and eventually drowned in a pit of urine and feces. Drowning in general in any way is a bad way to go, but drowning in excrement is particularly grim. The servant who fished his body out of the latrine also suffered a horrible death, as they were buried alive with Jing. Sucks. And finally, number 1, George V. George was the grandson of Queen Victoria and was responsible for the royal family adopting the name Windsor in 1917. He had been repeatedly ill since a fall in 1915 and didn't help that he was a heavy smoker and suffered from bronchitis. By January 1936, it was evident that he was ill for the last time and his royal physician was summoned. Rather than waiting for the end to come naturally, Dawson decided the king needed to die before midnight so the news would break in the morning edition of the Times rather than less appropriate evening journals. Yeah, this guy's a real one. Without the royal family's knowledge or the king's approval, he bumped him off with a lethal injection of morphine and cocaine. What's worse is that he may have struck again 2 years later, as George's sisters, Queen Maud of Norway, was visiting England when she suddenly became ill. She survived the abdominal surgery Dawson performed, but subsequently died of heart failure later after. Ominously, Lord Dawson reported to her Norwegian doctors that her death was a release, which saved her from these last painful stages of the disease, which was apparently cancer. It's kind of giving a little Michael Jackson controversy, to be honest. Anyways, that's all for today, and for your next riddle, what is 3/7 chicken, 2/3 cat, and 2/4 goats? Be sure to put your answer in the comments below, and I'll reveal the answer in the next video, Top 10 Scary Ways Women Were Punished in Ancient Egypt. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jessa. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see your faces in the next one. Bye.